Okay, so the whole town's frozen over with black ice, so I'm gonna have to wait till that clears up to be able to get back to the office. So we're doing yet another audio-only episode of Geek Culture Explained. God, I miss showing my pretty face to you guys. John Krasinski is supposed to be in Doctor Strange 2. Before we get into that, I do want to discuss something. A lot of people are asking if it's Layla Miller in the Moon Knight trailer. For those of you guys who don't know who Layla Miller is, she's a plot device character, and I'm not even joking, like she 100% is. She has the power to just know how things are supposed to be. She was literally writer Brian Michael Bendis' way of giving himself an out at the end of House of M. That's basically all it was, right? I mean, she is an unnecessary character. They killed her off, I think, and if they didn't, they probably should have, and it doesn't really matter because she's been gone for years. She has no real relevance whatsoever. My bet is that in that trailer, the Layla that's talking to Mark Spector is probably Layla Linsky, the girl from the old Marvel Presents comics back in the day. It was actually Marvel Presents number 54 where she originally showed up, but she was associated with like werewolves and all that kind of stuff, right? So I don't know if that's the case. Maybe they're reworking her. Maybe it really is Layla Miller, and because she was so useless in the comics, the MCU is actually giving her a purpose. No clue. Anyway, let's talk about Doctor Strange 2. So, a lot of the rumors and leaks and stuff that are coming out now, the irony about this is they've been around for a while, right? And the reality is that they're gaining traction now. One, because of the fact that the popularity and interest in the movie is increasing. For those of you guys who don't really know about this kind of stuff, it's one of the cornerstones of being a YouTube content creator. The closer you get to a particular thing, the more excitement and interest drums up for that thing. So that's one of the reasons why here on Geek Culture Explained, and especially on Comics Explained, we'll kind of explore things a little bit at the outset, right, when we're like a few months out. But the closer we get, the more content we produce about that thing, because there's a lot more interest than there is if you're 6 months out from there, right? So it's just kind of the nature of being a content creator. A little peek behind the curtain for you there. But one of the big things that's been going on recently, and not even really recently, is the idea of John Krasinski playing Reed Richards. Now, I'm not the first person to think of this, but I've been advocating for this for years. Anybody who has been a part of Geek Culture Explained knows this probably goes back maybe like 4 years, right? That I've been like, John Krasinski needs to play Reed Richards in the Fantastic Four. And I think it's kind of misplaced, but a lot of the fans that I have are like, you're the reason why everybody talks about the idea of like John Krasinski and Emily Blunt playing Reed Richards and Susan Storm in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm not going to take credit for that. I think it's kind of arrogant to do so. But I have been advocating for that for a long, long time, right? They're already married, right? They're exceedingly capable actors. Both John Krasinski and Emily Blunt have demonstrated, between John Krasinski doing, 13 Hours, that Michael Bay movie, and Emily Blunt doing Edge of Tomorrow, that like they can do action sequences, right? They can do like action scenes where there's like conflict and fighting and like fast-paced stuff. They can handle those, right? Because they have their marriage dynamic. We saw that play out in A Quiet Place, and they handled that perfectly. They're ridiculously versatile actors and actresses, right? They're exceedingly capable. And so them playing Reed Richards and Susan Storm in the MCU just makes good sense. Well, this is where all the leaks are starting to come out, right? Like recently it was put on 4chan, which I never go to 4chan. I actually found it by way of Reddit. But basically somebody had posted on 4chan and saying like, screenshot this, John Krasinski is going to play a variant of Reed Richards from the Fantastic Four in Doctor Strange 2. Not only that, apparently Ryan Reynolds is going to play going to appear as Deadpool in like a post-credit scene. Now, let's talk about Deadpool here for a second, right? Because this, I think, is probably the more exciting thing here in comparison to Reed Richards, right? Reed Richards being in Doctor Strange 2, that's cool, and I'm really hyped about it. It makes perfect sense, and I'll talk about why it makes sense for his character to be in Doctor Strange 2 here in a minute. But I think Deadpool is what people are really hyped about, because we all know that like Marvel Studios owns Deadpool now, or at least Disney owns Deadpool, right? Once they bought that entire section of Fox, and it was only a matter of time before we saw him appear in the MCU. And I don't know about you guys, I'm really more excited to see how Deadpool would interact with the cast of the MCU, because they're a lot more serious. They're a lot more like real world, kind of like how people exist here in the real world. They're a lot more like that. And so when you take a ridiculously comedic and over-the-top character like Deadpool, and then you introduce him to Doctor Strange, I feel like the possibilities would just be amazing. It would be hilarious, right? The only thing that I wanted to see more than that was the goatee bros, right? The beard bros. For those of you guys who don't know what that means, in what is it, All New, All Different Iron Man by Brian Michael Bendis, when Marvel basically went into the post-Secret Wars landscape, there was a moment where Doctor Strange and Iron Man had teamed up, or Iron Man had visited Doctor Strange or something like that, and because they both had goatees, Iron Man was like, yeah, goatee bros, and like put his hand in the air for a high five, and Doctor Strange just stood there with his arm crossed for like 3 panels, and then high-fived him, right? It was a funny little thing, right? You know, Doctor Strange's goatee. I'm surprised they never commented on it in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which I feel like was a missed opportunity. But taking Deadpool, who's ridiculously comedic, and slowly introducing him into the MCU, there's a lot that you can do there. And the funny thing about it is that Deadpool's post-credit scene does not need to be overly complicated, right? Like, if what they're looking to do is use the post-credit scene as a way to segue his character directly into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you can just do the old Christopher Priest stuff, right? Those guys who don't know, Deadpool, a lot of you guys know Deadpool is the guy who breaks the fourth wall and addresses the audience. Even if you're not familiar with the comics, you know that just by virtue of word of mouth, right? It's just one of the mainstay hallmarks of his character. Joe Kelly started that in his run in the late 1990s, but Christopher Priest is the one who made it a mainstay. And when Christopher Priest initially took over writing Deadpool, there was this moment where the comic basically opened with Deadpool being escorted to where he was going to quote-unquote live, which was basically this trailer park. And like when he opens the door to his trailer, it's all the characters that Marvel had basically canceled, because back then Christopher Priest was the writer where Marvel sent the characters to him. If they wanted to cancel them, he'd write out the end of their story. Sometimes he'd kill them off, and that would basically be it. But Deadpool literally looked in the trailer, and it was just all the characters that Christopher Priest had been assigned to like end the runs for. And he's like, nope, not a chance. So like he just leaves. And you could do something akin to that in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? Literally the post-credit scene is Deadpool like just kind of standing there in front of a portal, and it's like, I wonder where this goes, and then just enters, right? And then it's like, he's in the MCU now, and that's it, right? It doesn't have to be like overly complicated, doesn't need to be super in-depth, doesn't have to have like a greater meaning. The post-credit scene doesn't need to send us into a higher state of entropy. It can just be some basic, simple post-credit scene that fits in perfectly with the comedic and nonsensical nature of Deadpool, right? Like, Deadpool's in the MCU because reasons, and we won't care, right? Like, we really won't care how it is that Deadpool ends up in the MCU. The hand of God could come down and pick up Deadpool and sit him in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and we would just be like, cool, Deadpool's in the MCU now, awesome, right? I mean, that's literally that's how we would react, right? It wouldn't really matter. So it is cool that we're apparently going to see Deadpool as a post-credit scene in Doctor Strange 2, which is probably going to begin the process of bringing him into the MCU. Now, as far as Reed goes, again, it makes perfect sense that Reed Richards would be in Doctor Strange 2. One of the things that we've seen coming out is that basically the Illuminati is going to exist in Doctor Strange 2, albeit in an alternate reality. For those of you guys who are unfamiliar with that, we've had videos where we talked about that, specifically on Comics Explained. We deal with that heavily when we cover Jonathan Hickman's Avengers and New Avengers run, but they're basically a kind of secret organization, right? A secret coming together of different superheroes that basically just monitor the various threats of the world that exists out there. I mean, superheroes probably isn't the best word. They're the leaders of various superhero teams, right? So like, name with a Submariner, Black Bolt of the Inhumans, Black Panther, Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four, Professor Xavier of the X-Men, Captain America at one point in time, Iron Man, Doctor Strange. These guys just all kind of gather together and they operate in secret, just sort of controlling things behind the scenes. I mean, it goes about as bad as you would expect it to be. But one of the other things to kind of keep in mind here is that whether a lot of what's happening in Doctor Strange 2 is a result of the aftermath of Doctor Strange's spell or the events of universes crashing into each other because of Loki, it would make sense that like Doctor Strange is not the only person out there who notices it, right? That when you have the kind of return of the multiverse, right? This sort of untwining of this rope, as it were, and all these universes are just kind of spiraling out of control and crossing over with each other, it makes perfect sense that other people in other universes would start to notice, right? That maybe because somebody from an alternate universe crosses over into their alternate universe, and they're like, what the hell's going on, right? And they kind of start looking around and poking around and then come to this realization that basically the multiverse, as they understand it, is essentially going awry, right? It all kind of leads back to Kang the Conqueror. But the whole thing behind this is that when it comes to Reed Richards, one of the biggest changes to his character came during Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four, right? I did an AMA on Twitter yesterday, and one of the questions people had is, what's the best run of the Fantastic Four to read? And my response immediately was Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four. What he established there is that Reed Richards has this obsession to solve the problem of everything. And that despite what had gone on with regards to Reed Richards exploring different universes and things like that, because of the fact that it's not practical to like get into a ship with the rest of the Fantastic Four, fly to the edge of known space, cross that barrier into an alternate reality, that what Reed did is he created something that was called the Bridge. It was basically this giant kind of window that allowed him to look into alternate realities. And so when you had the collapse of the multiverse and Jonathan Hickman's Avengers, the New Avengers, one of the things that Reed Richards and the members of the Illuminati did, who were really referred to as the New Avengers, they used the Bridge and they started looking into alternate realities. It was really more of a task that was undertaken by Namor the Submariner and Black Panther, but you started seeing these alternate realities where people were starting to realize something's wrong with the multiverse. Some of them did the exact same thing Reed Richards did, where they were looking into alternate realities. Others were blissfully unaware of what was taking place. But it makes sense that if anybody out there in alternate realities is going to start looking around and realizing something's wrong with the multiverse and start investigating on their own, it would be Reed. And we would have to believe that, like, if the Illuminati really does exist out there in Doctor Strange 2, Reed Richards would have to be a part of it. And he would be their science guy, right? The guy they turn to for these questions involving science, right? Like, tell us what's happening. He was part of the team in the comics, he'd be part of the team in the MCU. More so than that, and moreover, it would also make sense that this Illuminati would be aware of Kang the Conqueror, right? They would be aware, yes, the multiverse is falling apart, and it's all because of that guy. And what we're basically trying to do is either try to find a way to stop him or try to find a way to keep our universe protected, right? Maybe isolating it or something along those lines. And someone like Doctor Strange represents a credible threat, because if their universe is hidden away, or if they don't exactly know that it's Kang, and then suddenly this multiversal magician basically shows up in their universe, that it's like, okay, that guy has to be part of the problem or something like that, right? The encounter between Doctor Strange and the Illuminati is predicated on the idea that the Illuminati is still trying to figure out what's going on, and they think it's Stephen Strange, right? So Reed would certainly be a guy who would be a part of that. And it would be even more interesting if that alternate reality version of Reed knew about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? Like, I've watched everything unfold in your universe, or I just recently started watching your universe and I saw what you did for Spider-Man. Kudos to you. We still got to lock you up because we don't really know what your deal is. But hey, man, like, it was a cool thing you did, right? Something along those lines. Again, we don't fully know what role he's going to play. The only thing that I would say I'm disappointed about with the idea of Krasinski playing Reed in this capacity is probably the same thing that a lot of you guys are disappointed about, which is it's basically him playing an alternate reality version of Reed. In truth, maybe this is a test, right? It may be one of these test kind of things, because something I've been saying for quite some time is that, yes, we're having this kind of unraveling of this rope of collected universes that all basically led to the establishment or the creation of He Who Remains, right? And that any other alternate reality that would lead to any other variant of He Who Remains, specifically Kang the Conqueror, was basically pruned, right? It just wouldn't be allowed to reach its conclusion, so they would never have to worry about Kang coming into existence. But with that not being the case, the multiverse is just sort of spiraling out of control, that either this is going to lead into Secret Wars, or it's going to lead into some kind of circumstance where at the end of all this, everything is contained again, right? The genie is quote unquote put back in the bottle, right? The mess is cleaned up. And what it's going to lead to is the Marvel Cinematic Universe basically grabbing all these different things that exist out there, right? Deadpool from the Fox properties, X-Men from the Fox properties, the Fantastic Four from the Fox properties, and just roping them all into a singular universe. So the multiverse will exist, but basically it's the events between really starting in Loki, going into Spider-Man No Way Home, going into Doctor Strange 2, probably into Ant-Man Quantumania, is quite literally the Marvel Cinematic Universe just reaching into alternate realities and grabbing these different characters and consolidating them all down, so that when the day is saved, Kang the Conqueror is defeated, and the multiverse is returned to its normal state, that now in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you've got John Krasinski, Reed Richards, and you've got the cast of the X-Men, whichever ones they want to keep. You've got Deadpool. You've got all these guys out there who previously existed in alternate realities, but because their universes were destroyed, or because all the different universes out there were just condensed down into a singular universe, now they all exist in the same place, right? I've been saying that for a while. So while I will say that it is kind of disappointing to see John Krasinski playing like some alternate reality version of Reed Richards, and that it's entirely possible that like after Doctor Strange 2, we never see or hear from him again, the other side of that coin is he's coming to the MCU. It's just waiting until the events of like Kang the Conqueror and the multiversal calamity and chaos and everything all just sort of corrects itself, right? Where it's all just fixed. And then we will have John Krasinski, fingers crossed, Emily Blunt as Susan Storm in the Marvel Cinematic Universe as the Reed and Susan of the Fantastic Four going forward forever. I don't care who they cast as anybody else. I would kind of love to see Michael Chiklis return as the Thing, right? There wasn't very much that was great about those original Fantastic Four movies, but Michael Chiklis was a great Ben Grimm. Well, they could also bring back Chris Evans to play Johnny Storm. That would be hilarious. It's like, hey guys, it's me, Captain America, or at least I used to be. Now I'm the Human Torch. Just the benefits of just being awesome like me. I mean, I think it'd be kind of funny, but regardless, there's a lot of possibilities here. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments section, right? Are you guys excited about this news? Are you kind of like, it's okay, whatever. We'll just wait until we get closer to the release date to find out what's really going on, or the movie, or what have you. Do you think the Marvel Cinematic Universe is pulling ruses, right? Like the Doctor Strange 2 equivalent of Andrew Garfield, right? Deny, 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 and then he jumps through a portal, rips his mask off, and the top comes off the theater, right? I mean, what do you guys really think is going on here? Let me know down in the comments. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.